Network Automation Nerds podcast. Hello and welcome to Network Automation Nerds podcast, a podcast about network automation, network engineering, and many technology topics. I'm your host, Eric Cho. In today's episode, we're continuing on our conversation with Damien Garros, CEO and co-founder of OpsMill. Last week, we talked about a little bit about Damien's background and what led him to the founding or the solving of this problem for OpsMill. And I'm super excited to continue our conversation. So welcome back, Damien.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Yeah, so where we left out last week was a very interesting topic on both the I guess on the technical level as well as on like the soft skill level, right? One thing you mentioned was we should pay more attention to other verticals. We're unique, but we're not that unique. We're special, but we're not that special. And I totally agree with that. So, and what spun off that was, of course, the relational versus the graph database and so on. So, why don't we continue on that topic, right? First of all, on, your that was your aha moment you were mentioning, that you look at other industries and you say, hey, everybody, retail, e-commerce, or retail, e-commerce, almost the same thing, but e-commerce, healthcare, and all these other industries are coming to this realization that they have to have extensible schema and using graph database. So why don't you elaborate a little bit on that?
Yeah, so that was actually the first one. And then again, I realized that there's a lot of power to bring the data in a central place.
Mm-hmm.
And then the next logical step is actually when you need to have everything in a central place, that means usually you have to copy the data from somewhere else to be able to bring it for consumptions in a central place.
Yeah, you have to extract and load, right? So like the industry was extract, load, and transform. So you're talking about the first two letters.
Yeah, and it's almost another industry, which is about, they call that the data platform, and the people that are specialized in ETL and moving data, and then big use case for it in their case is actually like building dashboards and all that.
Correct.
While looking at an industry, I actually learned about a term that was like this second haha moment for me. Was I saw people talking about data lineage, and what it means is that they realize that basically they are moving the data, and then at the end of the chain, someone is consuming that data, and at some point, this person was not trusting the data. It was like, am I actually looking at the latest data? Has it been updated? The pipeline was so complicated that he was doubting if he was looking at the right one. And so they started having a trust problem. And I think it's the same problem that we also have, and in many ways in our case, like in terms of when we start centralizing all the data in a system like Netbox or Nanobot, we have the same problem. I've experienced it myself. And so this data lineage, what I realized is that they're not just moving data. As every step of the way, they're also capturing a lot of metadata about the data itself in terms of like, where is it coming from? Who is the owner? If there is a problem, who should I go to? And like all of those metadata information, that will basically tell you at the end of the chain if you can trust that data and who you should get to if you have any questions.
Yeah, by the way, I just want to point out that is why the lineage problem is why we're trusting like the production, using that as a source of truth, right? Like it must be right. If it's working in production, that must be like the most optimal way to do it, right? But that's not necessarily true. But for a lack of other ways to do this, that's why we're always going back to like the switch and say, okay, what's the VLAN structure today?
Yeah. And so when I actually realized that, I immediately in my mind, I was like, okay, we need to be able to capture metadata in addition to the data in the source of truth. Because again, we want to be able to have people bring their data in a central place so that we have a single schema. And this idea of a single source of truth, personally, I'm not sold on it. Like there's always going to be multiple systems. Mm-hmm. So we're always going to have to do some synchronization, but it has to be done right. And what's important is that if you copy a data somewhere, for it to be consumed, you have to protect it. You have to make sure that no one is going to touch it.
Right. You have to lock it. Yeah.
So that's the first place. And the second one is you need to provide visibility of where this data is coming from to the user so that they understand that if they want to change it, where they have to go. Mm-hmm. And that's where this metadata for me was really super important. So it's actually features that we built into our product. And for me, that was the features. I immediately again realized that I would never be able to do that with a relational database, because that means pretty much having a dedicated table for every single attributes and
Right.
having
You
a lot
have
of,
like so many to many relationship. It's crazy.
yes, that wouldn't work. But in a graph database, it's actually super easy. It's like almost natural, because the way we organize the data, it's super easy on any given data points to build relationships, to create and capture these networks of metadata around each and every attribute. And I guess that was my second, haha moments, where I was like, okay, there's no doubt, like we have to move away from relational database and move to graph database, and have system that has a very flexible schema, support metadata, and has version control. And yeah, started building the prototype, and then I started reaching out to Raphael, my co-founder, and it was like, hey man, I've been facing the exact same problem for years. And then we started to join forces and decided to start the company together.
Wow, that's very interesting, right? I mean, I think a lot of us in the engineering world, we realize the problem and we may have like a technical solution, but it's one thing to realize and even have a prototype, but it's another to actually leaving the safety of a corporate world. Even though you were always, just from our conversation, you're always in the startup world, right? So it's inherently more risky than say Juniper or Cisco, but at the same time, it's another really leap of faith to actually go start your own company. So tell us more about that.
Yeah, I think pretty much since I graduated, I knew someday I will, start a company. I always
Nice.
had this entrepreneur mindset. I think from like intrapreneur, they call that, like, in a lot of different places. I was
Sure. Or spin-ins, as Cisco would say it, right?
so I was always trying to push, my own project and things like that internally.
Right.
And I think again, to do it, you need to have the right idea. And
Mhm.
so it took me. I've been thinking about that for probably 5 years before I actually decided to jump.
Oh, wow.
Um, I got lucky that thanks to Roblox, I had a bit of saving that would give me the freedom of like not have to worry every day, and give me a little bit of space so that I can do that.
Mhm.
And then yeah, and after that, there was also finding the right partners. Super important to actually have the right partners. So I was lucky to find Raphael. So Raphael Monnier is a very experienced entrepreneur in the infrastructure space. He
Mhm.
was also based in France, and so we really met. We had the same experience with the problem, same passion for it. So that was also a very big part of creating that company, because it's really hard to do that alone. So
Yeah,
we
so
put all
how
that.
where is OpsMill today? So you mentioned you met him, Raphael, and he's so I guess he had exits before it, or was he how
Yeah,
much funding?
multiple times. I think he did
Multiple exits.
a few of them. Yeah. So yeah, we're very actively building the product. We're making our way through a beta, so more like in a private manner right now. We're working with multiple, like we call that design partners,
Sure.
companies that have experience in automation, that understand some of the pain point that we're trying to solve, and they are very eager to work with us to help us finalize the design. So yeah, we assembled a team. So we managed to we got very lucky. We in our industry, like for example, we're so lucky to manage to get Patrick Ogenstad to join us. A lot of you probably know him. He's done a lot of writing in the industry. So early on, we managed to have Patrick, and then we have other member of the team. And so yeah, right now we're actively building the product.
Nice, nice. So I mean, there's just a lot of interesting ideas, right? And coming into kind of this problem space, you almost have to go through the same pain point that you have done before, right? To have this kind of convincing yourself that this is like graph database for example, is the way to go versus relational database. And for people who are not who are even not who are using spreadsheets, right? Who are not even using a regular relational database or APIs to solve their problem, it almost like it takes a leap of faith to trust you to say, "Hey, Damien, I think you've done all of these other stuff, and now you come to that conclusion." Just as you were looking at other industry, right? Like other smart people who have faced the same problem come to this conclusion. So I trust you, and I will use your product. So, is that true, or is that how are you acquiring these? Like you said, right? Like these beta users who are experiencing the same problem.
I mean, there's certainly an element of trust.
Yeah.
Now, I think it's if the pain point is big enough, people are really eager to find a solution. And in this specific space, we talk to so many companies that are building automation, and every single one of them, they are looking for solution to those problems. How do I manage more extensibility, more version controls, and basically make my entire stack more manageable? So
Hmm.
when you come and bring a different approach and potentially a solution to their problem, then they're really, of course, they think about the maturity of the product and the risk, but they really helps, I think, make the jump.
Hmm.
At the end of the day, if they didn't have a problem, they would not even talk to us.
Right.
So, and then that's kind of also what I wanted to bring at AutoCon, and why I did this presentation is I feel like today we're not talking enough about those problems. Like we see more people that are getting started in automation, that are super excited, that are building their first CI/CD pipelines and deployments, and they write blogs that is like, and it feels like all the problem have been solved. Again, super excited that we get more people and more energy in this space and more voices. I think it's great, but I I wish we would also acknowledge that this is just one generation in our journey. And I think we made such a big leap from where we were previously with the spreadsheet. Now it's not the end of the journey. There's still a lot of work ahead of us, and I think we need to keep looking and working. And it's not necessarily mean that bad for the current generation of the tools. Just the evolution. There's always many generation of tools, and yeah, I really love to have more discussion on that. I think again we've been thinking about it. We've been trying to bring all of that into design of what we're doing. But I think as an industry, if everyone was actually brainstorming on that and openly talking about those limitations, that will help us move even faster.
Yeah, so let's change gear a little bit on just, from the product side. So now we know, a little bit about your background, which is certainly extensive and, high level, very technically involved. And now you're building your own tool. But now, let's doing at the macro level as you were, starting to get into, right? So what do you think about, the industry in general, like you said, right? Like, so I have my own personal opinion on the kind of like the polarization of network automation, where we have people who are living in their own bubble, who everything is hyperscale, everything is Google, Amazon, and we have people who are in their own team, which is like one or two, like 1.5 network engineers, right? That the point 0.5 also handles Windows server administration and all that. What are your thoughts on that? Where is the industry right now, in terms of network automation?
Yeah, it's a good. There was a lot of discussion about that in Denver.
Right.
First, I think it's massively growing. You can tell that the number of people that are participating in this discussion, just the number of people we had in Denver was actually pretty mind-blowing. We had 350 people.
Mhm.
I remember
Minus
in
1, with this dude right here.
I remember in 2018 there was for me, which was the previous network automation conference that was organized actually by Network to Code before I joined them. It
Right.
was done on the side of Interop, not Interop.
Oh, no, I remember that. It was virtual, wasn't it?
No. We actually had one
Oh, okay.
initially in Vegas,
Okay.
and that was amazing. But at the time, we may had like 80 people in the room or something like that.
Yeah.
And I
I wanted
was,
to
yeah,
say interop, but maybe that's not it.
I think it was Interop, yeah.
Okay.
And Jason was the driver and the network code team at the time behind that. But yeah, so looking now, having 350 people, you can definitely tell that the community has grown. I think there's more realization that my takeaway from Denver, the first one in what I really like is more people now are talking about design-driven automation.
Okay.
And I think it's probably a better term than intent-based networking, but this idea that in many cases, we always have a design behind what we're doing, and it's just that today this design is not properly captured. And we need to see more. We need to have the design as part of the automation tools. Like in the past, I think the automation was focusing on the low-level elements that will generate from the design, but they will not necessarily capture the design.
Yeah.
Jeremy Schumann did a really great presentation at Denver explaining how he's doing that at MLD. Personally, I really like what the Arista guys are doing with the AVD project, where they also have this design aspect in mind. And I've had many conversations at AutoCon where people also start to think along those lines. And I know many customers that are thinking the same. It's like, we need to start capturing our design, and we need to have tools and our own system, and that would generate the low-level implementations based on this higher-level design. And that's how we're going to make all of that manageable. And again, so I'm very excited with that, because for me, at the end, it goes back to capture all of that in a proper source of truth. That means you need even more extensibility of the schema, because
absolutely,
while the technical layer is probably going to be shared across everyone, but the design is going to be different. So that just speak to what we're building and align with our vision. So I think that was pretty exciting.
Oh yeah, totally, right? Because I remember, even back at when I was at Microsoft, I mean, we will have, this is all open, public information, right? Like we will have different versions of our data centers, V9, V8, V10, so on and so forth. And every time we finalize that design, right, going from V9 to V10, for example, there's many, many messy iterations and inputs from different business teams. Like, at Microsoft, so you have, from Bing, from Azure, from Office, Windows, whatever. And then those were like kind of mixed together, and then you got this jumbo, output at the end where we have that design, but none of that was captured, right? So like, maybe this was the decision. It was a compromise between like the requirement from Azure and Windows or whatnot. And then on, Vision 11 design, because those were not captured, we're making the same mistake. We're talking about the same discussion that we've had before. And then, we may or may not come up with the same conclusion just because the people in charge were different. So I totally see what you're talking about on, being more the low technical detail. This is the switch that we, the switch spec that we, settled on. This is the vendor. This is how many ports. This is a spine and core layer. But none of that prior stuff were captured. So if we had been able to capture all of that, that would have saved us a quick iteration time so much.
Yeah. And again, I think the best public version of that is what Arista is doing. So go check it out. Arista Validated Design. They're doing really, really good stuff.
Right, but the problem with that is it's just Arista, right? They're not going to capture
in a way. But again, at least sometimes people need to see to understand, and so they've done an amazing job actually to put a lot of things outside. They have videos. They're really good at. They have really great documentation. So yeah, this idea of design-driven automation for me is really well represented by the Arista team.
Yeah, and also it matches what you were talking about before, right? Like capture the meta history.
And the other aspect that I took from the conference was I feel like there's more and more people that realize that we need more professionalization of this space.
Okay.
One thing that was actually missing for me, and maybe I'll add my own perspective to it, is there was always discussion like, hey, we're still talking, hey, there's the network engineers, there's the software engineer. Do we need to have the network engineer learn code, or do we need to have the software engineer learn networking? I personally, what was I missing in this conference is the acknowledgement that it's neither of them. It's like we need to have a new roles. We need to have a network automation person or a network NRE, or like it's not the network engineer will have to learn some of the stuff, but that doesn't mean they have to become full programmers. And the software engineer is not going to be a network automation architect. For me, it's like there's this new field that we're creating right now.
Mm-hmm.
Some people will probably transfer from both sides. Like we'll see software engineers becoming automation architects, and we'll see network engineers becoming automation architects. But we just have to accept that we're creating a new functions in the organization, and it's more than just which one do we need to train to do the other job, or so on. I
Hey, if you
personally,
if you come up with a new term, let me know, right? Because I'm dying to do that as well, right? Like I was so excited when people came out with DevOps or like this new way of describing what we're seeing already, right? So but coming up with a term that accurate captures the ideas and concepts, that is the hard part. But you know,
for me, that would be network automation architects. And
okay,
actually, when I was at Network to Code, I pushed really hard for us to create a team
okay,
that was called the architecture team, because even inside Network to Code, we had these situations where we had a lot of really bright people, all very knowledgeable about automation. But at some point, we realized not everyone was able to lead the design of an entire platform with the customers, and so I will personally think this role of network automation architect or infrastructure automation architect is really has some specific skills.
mm-hmm.
And
We
then the
use
other
a
one,
roll of the tongues like platform engineering, right?
so platform engineering for me is more like the network reliability engineers. It's like
Sure.
the people that make sure the tools are running and understand the business aspect of those tools and the business aspect of what they're actually managing, so that they can make, like, the NRE is the one that has a deep understanding of the network and has software skill. He may not have understanding of the network architecture, but he can write the code to make the network work. So that's the NRE for me.
Yeah,
And
good point.
in that organization, I think you will have NRE, and you have network automation architects, and you'll have network engineers and network architects. Like, all roles have a place. But yeah, so I wish there was more of that in the conference. And the last one was more professionalization, in the sense that there was few discussion. I wouldn't say it was a general agreements, but there was few people trying to push the narrative that we need to have more vendors. And I'm not saying that because we're in this journey
Vendors at the conference or vendors within the space?
within the space. It's just
I
at
see.
some point
Oh, more competition, you mean? Okay.
it's also like, and I think Jeremy Schumann was the one really pushing for it. He was like, I should not have to build all those tools. Like, if we're in an industry where everyone has to build their own tools and build a software team internally, it's
Yeah.
not going to work. And so
Yeah.
he was really pushing, like, we need to have vendors that build the right tools so that we can buy them and integrate them. Like, we're too much into the do-it-yourself kind of way.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, I'm biased right now, but in a many way, I'd like to think that I decided to make the jump and do all of that because I had the same belief in the same place, that the only way we actually get out is by having better tools and more mature tools. Like, I personally also wish we had better open source community,
Yeah.
in a sense that we're talking about Kirk earlier and all the work that it does, and how
We need
many
more
people
Kirks, you mean?
sorry.
No, I would say we need more Kirks and we need more Jeremy Schulman, but at the same time, they're saying, no, I don't want to do it, right? Like I should be offloading that to people who actually get paid to do it.
Actually, I mean, honestly, if everyone that was using what Kirk is maintaining was giving him, like, even just like $10 a year,
Right.
he could probably hire a team of people to work with him. And I wish, we would have ways for companies to bring back more money into the open source tools that they use.
Yeah.
I feel like we're missing that right now. The open source community that we have some great projects, but it's all based on individuals. At Network to Code, we'll call that the hero mindset, or like
Yeah.
the hero cultures. Like, we really depend on people doing these extra miles to maintain those projects. And I think that's long term, that's not going to be sustainable. Again, huge kudos to anyone that is doing that today and contributing and all of that. And I've tried to do my own share of that. But yeah, as an industry, we really need to start thinking, okay, that's a lot of work that deserves something. So, we should really try to think of how we could bring more money into, like, someone at the conference, brought the idea like, hey, maybe we need to have a foundation, like,
Yeah.
like the CNCF, but for our kind of project, so that
Right.
companies, it's easier for them to put money into it, and then these foundations can, bring back or redistribute some of that money to the open source project.
Yeah, not
Uh,
just yeah, that's what very interesting, right? Because that's what PSF, like the Python Software Foundation, started to do. I don't know if people are familiar with it, but so the problem with Python, of course, was like there are tools, open source tools like Request or some other libraries that are used by billion-dollar company, Fortune 500, by NASA to land spacecrafts on Mars and space station, but these would rely on like five dudes in their garage maintaining it, right? So the Python Software Foundation have decided, and also there are like other grassroots movement on Python meetups and so on that are depending on one or two people to maintain, like the meetup in Seattle, meetup in LA or whatnot. So the Python Software Foundation have created this non-profit structure. There already are the 503s, and so they do all the paperwork, but now they're grabbing like the Django, the meetups and the request software with Flask, for example, right? That project, they come in so they don't have to deal, and then they allocated funds to them so they don't have to deal with like the paperwork, having the directors or having like quarterly board meetings in order to still qualify for that nonprofit. So that's super interesting that you brought it up.
yeah, again, that was just a all the way conversation, but I really, my hope is, maybe our industry move toward more of that. I think that would be, we need more. I really believe in open source. Again, I've been involved. We're actively thinking, and most likely, what we're building is gonna, be in open source.
Yeah. Oh,
Uh,
really? Oh, wow.
I don't want to commit anything, it's
No, no,
still an
no. Yeah, yeah.
suspicion, but it's definitely, something we're discussing, very
Right.
often, because I do see a lot of the value of that.
Yeah. At least being
Uh,
entertained on that front, right?
yeah, but again, this today it's hard because so many people are saying open source are just like taking it and not giving back.
Right.
So that's also, I think, what's like holding probably a lot of company from participating. So
For me, I don't think it's people don't want to give back. It's almost like the remember when prior to what is that music streaming platform?
Spotify.
Yeah, Spotify. So prior to Spotify, right? It was hard to just pay 99 cents or whatever, or Apple Apple Music, right? It was very hard for them to enjoy the benefits of digital music without properly licensing it, right? But once you provide people with a way to enjoy the music, legally stream it, legally purchase the digital rights and so on, then people are willing to do that. So I mean, what are your thoughts on that?
I agree. I think my analysis will be actually the people that wants to give back are probably not the one holding the wallet.
Hmm.
When the company, the technical community is usually involved with open source and they see the value, but they don't necessarily have the ability to make the move.
Right.
That will be one. The second one will be that I don't think the open source product today are stricter to receive some money.
Yeah.
There was this aspect that you need to have an organization to receive the money. You need to have an organization to redistribute that to the contributors. Like there's probably a lot of things missing. So yeah, I'm not, the blame is not just on the users. I wasn't trying to pick them as like
No,
uh,
we love the users. Please continue to use it and give us
no, yeah,
eyeballs.
for sure. But I maybe it's more on the managers. Yeah, there's probably a lot of things. No, one thing I really love is there's few companies that are actually like actively basically redistributing to the open source for all the project that they are using internally.
Hmm.
Um, I know like Sentry have been very open about that, and they have
Right.
a call, and and I think it's really the right mindset. Like, hey, we couldn't build a product without it, so we're gonna redistribute some of our benefits to the community. I wish more company would do that. I certainly hope and plan on doing that myself. When we get to the point where we actually have revenue. Uh, but yeah, maybe some thoughts. But that probably needs to come from higher up in the management chain.
Yeah, I think it just needs to be discussed, right? Like talking about it really is the first step. I mean, I had Danshu on, who's the organizer for PyCon and some of the other like PyData and all that stuff within the Seattle community. And he's now, I think he's partner of a VC fund who's sponsoring these open source projects for Python data science. So I think talking about it really is the first step, and we need to figure out or just borrow it from Python, for example, on the right approach and business model so that I can make it work. I mean, something I didn't realize was, you know, a lot of projects are saying open source projects like, hey, we could survive on $20,000 a year, right? But for companies like Microsoft, it's easy for them to write a $20,000 check, but it's hard for them to write it to a small company to just write 20,000. They much rather just do a one-time thing for 100K for, I don't know, 2 years, right? And then they have to justify to their company on what are we getting out of it. Maybe is driving the direction of that project, maybe sitting on the board or influence the decision or which feature to implement and so on. But does that impact the nature or the spirit of open source or community driven? So I think talking about it is the first way. And the second is really to figure out a business model where that's sustainable.
Yeah, yeah. I really hope as an industry we can have more of this conversation again, make some progress toward that. Whatever is the way it will looks like, but
Yeah.
we
I
need, we
mean,
need something. We need something like that. I think.
it goes back to what you were talking about before the end of our first part was, we need to look at other industry more, right? We need to get out of our own silo and go look at, okay, what are other people doing? And that, I mean, in my own small way, that's what I'm trying to do too with the podcast is just to invite people who are in the network industry, but like yourself, who has a very diverse background, and even people like Don. I don't think that episode ranked like the top 5 that ever listened, but it was worth it. It was worth to look at from a business perspective and look at it from like a VC perspective on, why sponsor open source, right? Like what's in it for me? Is it just out of the goodwill of me? That could be it. But, to be on the long-term sustainability, it needs to have something in it for me as well.
Yeah, 100%. I'll go back and listen to this one. I think.
Oh no, no. I mean, that's not my own prop. That's not what I meant. But I totally agree to everything you're saying. I'm happy that the conversation starting, and it was so good to see like even just the launch of AutoCon 0 on such a well received. And hopefully we'll see AutoCon 1, 2, 3, and 4 and 5, right?
Yeah, I heard they're already planning on one. So
Yeah, they're
one
really
and two,
planning on
I think
one
they already mentioned that. Yeah, they're most likely. I think one is going to be
in Europe.
in Europe in spring, and then they're planning 2 in the US back in fall. So.
Yeah, I mean, hopefully it's not too late in the year. I mean, they had it in Denver. I'm glad it didn't snow or anything, right? But it's a non-zero chance that you might get a bad weather, and
Yeah,
yeah, we'll
I didn't
see.
get a chance to leave the hotel anyway, so could have been a blizzard outside that I probably wouldn't have noticed. So.
Yeah, exactly. Well, thanks again, Damien, for being on the show. So where can people find you on social or on to find more information about what you're building, what you're up to?
Yeah, the best nowadays probably LinkedIn and GitHub.
Okay.
Still, from time to time on Twitter or X, but more as a learning than really writing.
Okay.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thanks again for being on the show. I really enjoyed our conversation. I hope, to see, I will invite you back once the product is launched. How far away do you think, I mean, I'm not trying to put you on the spot, but how far away do you think that you have some sort of like version 0.1 beta out in public?
Yeah, the public aspects were still, I'll say, 3 to 6 months, but again, don't hold me to that, please.
Oh, wow. That's really quick. I mean, I guess, you do have investors that needs to take care of, right? That you need to
Yeah,
answer.
we're working on that too, but yeah.
Oh, okay. Got it. Cool. Well, thanks again for being on the show. I really enjoyed our conversation.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for listening to Network Automation Nerds podcast today. Find us on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, and all the other podcast platforms. Until next time. Bye bye.